My name is Shirley Calendar, and the message that broke me didn't arrive with fireworks. It didn't come as a dramatic phone call or a polite invitation wrapped in gold foil. No, my family's betrayal showed up as a 7-word text that landed like a blade between my ribs. It's just easier without you. That was my cousin Marissa's response when I asked if maybe, just maybe, my invitation to her wedding had gotten lost in the mail. No explanation, no softened edges, no emoji to cushion the blow. Just a cold sentence that somehow hit harder than any argument we'd ever had, harder than any scolding I'd endured growing up. And trust me, there had been plenty. I didn't reply. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. I just stared at my phone, the words dissolving and reappearing as if my mind couldn't decide whether to believe them. My apartment felt suddenly too quiet, too small, too sharp around the edges. It was ridiculous how a single line of text could rattle the bones of a woman who thought she'd outgrown caring about family approval. But the truth was, I had always cared. Let me back up. I've always been the one who shows up, the quiet cousin, the dependable one, the fixer. When my aunt needed rides after her surgery, I took days off work and drove her myself. When Trent needed help moving out of his dorm during a storm, I was the one hauling boxes through knee-deep slush. When my uncle forgot his wallet at a restaurant, guess who covered the bill again? Not to paint myself as some saint, I'm not. But I've always believed that family meant responsibility, effort, presence, even when it wasn't appreciated, even when the gratitude never came, even when the favoritism was so blatant it might as well have been printed in the family newsletter. My family functioned like a sitcom where the writers didn't believe in boundaries. Every gathering had its hierarchy. Every conversation had subtext. Every whisper had a target. And I was always someplace on the outer ring, close enough to be useful, never close enough to be valued. But I thought foolishly that my consistency, my reliability, my willingness to help would eventually earn me a seat at the table. I was wrong. The funniest part, the wedding was all anyone talked about for months. Marissa, the golden child, with a growing influencer following, was marrying Caleb, her long-term boyfriend, with the perfect jawline and the personality of a beige sofa. The family group chat practically turned into her personal wedding production channel. Cake tastings, dress fittings, a custom hashtag. Even my Uncle Ron had been roped into rehearsing a surprise flash mob for the reception. Everyone had a role, except me. At first, I didn't let myself panic. Invitations get lost. Schedules get mixed up. Maybe Marissa had assumed I still lived out of state. Maybe she thought I'd seen the details in the chat. Maybe she sent an invite digitally and it bounced. I gave her excuses she didn't deserve. So I reached out. Nothing dramatic, just a quick, "Hey, I saw all the wedding details in the chat. Should I book a hotel or is there a family block reserved?" 3 hours later, the reply came. "It's just easier without you." Those words didn't just sting, they cracked something inside me. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she meant it differently. Maybe she'd follow it with another text explaining everything. No follow-up came. The silence after that message was louder than any scream. I didn't tell anyone what she wrote, not my mother, not my younger sister, not even Evan, my boyfriend. I couldn't bear to hear the predictable responses. "She's overwhelmed. She didn't mean it personally. You're reading too much into it." No, this wasn't a slip. It was a decision, a choice, a declaration of my place in the family hierarchy, useful when needed, forgettable otherwise. For days, I replayed every moment I had ever shared with Marissa, the late-night chats we had as teenagers, the birthday I planned for her when she told me she'd never had a surprise party, the countless photos I took and edited for her influencer page, the invitations I designed, the errands I ran, the times I defended her behind her back, insisting she wasn't as self-involved as she seemed, And now, apparently I was the inconvenience. Eventually, the anger settled beneath my ribs like a hot stone, and without thinking too long, I made a decision of my own. I booked a solo cruise. Not out of spite at first. I just needed distance, salt air, silence, new faces who didn't know my family history, overpriced buffet breakfasts where no one asked me to fix anything or take their picture, a week to disappear from everything that hurt. I didn't tell a soul. I simply packed a suitcase, turned off my phone, and walked onto that ship like I was stepping into a parallel universe. The cruise left the same weekend as the wedding. My only public acknowledgement was an Instagram story, a photo of the ocean at sunset. My legs crossed on a lounge chair, a cocktail in hand. No caption. For 2 days, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. No group chat alerts, no obligations, no passive-aggressive remarks disguised as jokes, no pressure to smile through the sting of being overlooked. Just me, the sea, and the soft hum of a world where I belonged to no one. Then the morning of the wedding, my phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. 12 missed messages from Aunt Karen, Marissa's mother, each one more frantic than the last. The caterer backed out. It's a disaster. We need help. You're good at logistics. Wire $7,000 now or the wedding is ruined. You owe this family. Those 4 final words turned my stomach. You owe this family. Not please, not we're desperate, not we'll pay you back. A demand, a guilt trip, an accusation wrapped as responsibility. I stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to something darker, calmer. No. They pushed me out, labeled me the problem, insisted things were easier without me. And now they wanted saving. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Because as I stood barefoot on the deck, watching the sun rise over the open sea, something inside me shifted. If they thought life was easier without me, they were about to learn what without me really felt like. I didn't respond to Aunt Karen's messages. Instead, I turned off my phone, set it face down on the small table beside my deck chair, and spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing. No fixing, no comforting, no volunteering, no bending myself into shapes small enough to fit into a family that had never once made space for me. For the first time in years, my silence wasn't punishment. It was protection. But as the waves rolled on and the cruise ship drifted toward its next port, I knew the story didn't begin with that text. The wedding fiasco was merely the final blow, the moment the dam finally cracked, after years of hairline fractures. If I wanted to understand why those 7 words hurt as deeply as they did, I had to go back. When we were younger, Marissa and I weren't enemies. We weren't best friends either. But in a family as chaotic as ours, we found comfort in being the 2 cousins without siblings close in age. At holidays, we'd hide in coat closets, eating stolen chocolates, whispering about which uncle would get drunk first or which aunt would cry over the turkey. She used to tell me everything about her first crush, her dreams of being famous, her fear of braces. I used to tell her things too, though, never as much. Even then, as kids, Marissa had a way of speaking over my confessions, like she was rearranging my story to fit hers. Still, we stuck together. Back then, it worked. Back then, I believe family loyalty ran both ways. But things changed after college. Marissa came back with a minor following on Instagram and a major attitude shift. She became obsessed with status aesthetics and validation. Every family gathering became a content opportunity. Every story she posted was a curated performance. Her compliments turned into shallow assessments. Her questions became setups for stories she wanted to tell. And slowly I saw the difference in how she looked at me. She used to laugh at my quirky style. Now she folded her arms and said things like, "You're so unconventional," or "That's cute, very indie," or "I could never live like that, but it's very you." I wasn't offended at first. I thought she was just growing up. But then the rest of the family followed her lead, like she'd become the designated compass of what was admirable and what was quirky. Suddenly, I was always seated at the far end of the dinner table. I was the last to hear news. My work, my design projects, my art, my freelancing didn't count as real. My availability, however, always counted. If a chair needed carrying, I was asked. If someone needed help with their phone, I was summoned. If a photo needed taking, I was volunteered. If a crisis needed fixing, Shirley will handle it. But when it came to celebrations, invitations, inclusion, crickets, little cuts, dozens of them, all small enough to ignore individually, but together they formed a wound that never fully healed. Then came the Christmas incident, 2 years before the wedding. Mom had begged me to drive 4 hours in a snowstorm because Aunt Karen's annual Christmas Eve dinner was really important this year. Mom said having everyone together would lift her spirits. So I went. I brought gifts. I baked a pie from scratch one I dropped twice and remade because I wanted everything perfect. I walked in snow, still melting in my hair, and barely 3 people looked up from their glasses. I laughed it off like always. But then after dinner, Marissa stood up and pulled out a stack of hand-lettered envelopes. Fancy envelopes, sliver metallic ink, hand-drawn flourishes. She passed them out one by one. Inside were invitations not to her wedding, but to her influencer 500K celebration party. Very exclusive, she said. Formal theme, silver and white, only close family and collaborators invited. Everyone got an envelope. Everyone, except me. I sat there smiling so hard my teeth hurt. I kept nodding, pretending I didn't notice, pretending it didn't sting like a direct punch to the chest. Even my 11-year-old cousin, who Marissa once banned from touching her furniture, got one. Later, when everyone was distracted by dessert, I found a quiet spot and asked her about it. Gently, casually. Hey, did you maybe forget mine? She shrugged. Actually shrugged. Oh, it's mostly for networking. You'd be bored. I felt the dismissal before I understood it. The way she said it like I was a child tugging at her sleeve, asking to join the adults. Like she was pitying me. That was the day the fractures widened. The next blow came during her engagement dinner. Aunt Karen messaged me privately. You better come. We're counting on you to take photos. Not, we'd love to have you there. Not, Shirley, you're part of this. Just a directive. A job. I showed up. I smiled. I took over 300 photos. I edited them that same night and uploaded them to their shared folder. She used exactly 2. Credited an influencer friend instead. When I mentioned it weeks later, she laughed. Oh my God, Shirley, you don't care about that stuff. You're not attention hungry. That one barely had to twist to land like a knife. Then the bridal shower. I wasn't invited. Not even as the unofficial photographer. I found out because someone posted a photo of Marissa standing under a balloon arch with a mimosa in one hand and a cardboard cutout of her own face in the other. The caption, "Best bridal shower ever, love my tribe." I zoomed in on the group photo. Every male cousin, even Caleb's former roommate, all smiling, all welcome. But apparently not me. Mom tried to soften it. Maybe they didn't invite guys, she said. But I saw the photos. They invited guys, just not me. So when the wedding invitation never came, I wasn't shocked. Still hurt, still burned like betrayal, but not surprised. I reached out anyway, quietly, humbly, hoping there had been a mistake or at least a lie I could swallow. And Marissa finally said the thing she'd been inching toward for years. It's just easier without you. Easier. Without me. The girl who planned her first surprise birthday. The cousin who stayed up helping her write posts when she had creative block. The woman who covered her mistakes, celebrated her wins, applauded her milestones. Easier without me. So when Aunt Karen's frantic wedding day messages came through, begging me to save the day, offering guilt in place of apology, I didn't react with rage. I reacted with clarity. They had told me what I was. Not family. A tool. A resource. A backup plan. Someone to call only when the real favorites failed. So I turned off my phone, pulled my sun hat low, and let the wind blow across my face as the ship cut through turquoise water. They wanted a world without me. Fine. I'd let them see what that world really looked like. For about 48 hours, the world existed exactly how I'd always wished. It could quiet, peaceful, uncomplicated. I woke up early, wandered the ship's deck with a cup of too sweet coffee, watched elderly couples slow dance to old Sinatra songs by the pool, and let the breeze tangle my hair without caring how it looked. No expectations, no obligations, no family voices pulling at me from every direction. I didn't check my phone. Not once. Not out of spite, but because I needed to remember who I was when I wasn't being used. But peace never lasts, not when there's a storm waiting. On the morning the ship docked in Nassau, I powered my phone back on. I wish I hadn't. The screen lit up like a dying Christmas tree, dozens of notifications fighting for attention. Missed calls, unread messages, voicemails. So many voicemails. The first previews alone made my stomach twist. Shirley, this is serious. Call us back. You're letting your family fall apart. We know you're seeing these messages. And then the one from Marissa herself. I froze. Her voice was tight, controlled. I'd heard that tone before when she was trying to hold herself together for an audience. I don't know what game you're playing, Shirley, but this is low. Even for you. Even for you. Like I had a history of cruelty. Like I was the unreliable one. You don't just abandon people on their wedding day. You don't just sit back and watch things fall apart. Coming from the same woman who told me it was easier without me in the first place. You owe us. You owe me. Then she hung up. I stood in the middle of the bustling cruise terminal, surrounded by sunburnt tourists and families in matching t-shirts, and felt something inside me harden. Not anger, not sadness. Something like clarity. No more excuses. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. No more pretending they didn't know exactly what they were doing. The truth was suddenly so crisp, it made my chest ache. They didn't want me unless I was a solution. They didn't value me unless I was fixing something. They didn't love me unless it was convenient. And I was done. The rest of the cruise felt different after that, less like a getaway and more like a reset, a detox, a quiet beginning. I read a book by the pool, even though I only finished half of it. I took long naps with my cabin curtains wide open, letting sunlight spill across me like warmth. I'd never been allowed to rest in before. I ate my dinners alone and guiltlessly. I let myself exist in the simplest way possible. And strangely, it felt like healing. But walking off the ship 7 days later felt like stepping back into gravity after floating. The air was heavier, the world louder, and my phone once again buzzed nonstop. 22 missed calls, 17 voicemails, more messages than I could scroll through. But the text told me everything I needed to know. The wedding happened. Barely. A patchwork catastrophe of chain restaurant appetizers, grocery store deli trays, a half-melted cake, and a DJ who stormed off after arguing with the best man. Guests complained. The schedule fell apart. The flash mob was canceled. Someone spilled rosé on Marissa's dress. It was chaos held together by sheer denial. And unsurprisingly, they blamed me. Screenshots came in forwarded by cousins who didn't want to pick sides, but also couldn't resist the drama. Marissa hadn't messaged me directly again, but she'd posted an Instagram story, a blurry photo of her and Caleb holding sparklers with the caption, "You can't choose family, but you can choose to move on." Broken heart emoji. I stared at that photo for a long time, studying the fake smile she'd forced onto her face. She was miserable, but not because of me, because she'd been exposed to herself, not to the world. That night, when I finally got home, I didn't unpack. I didn't shower. I just collapsed on my couch, still in my loose linen cruise clothes, and stared at the ceiling until the room blurred. I expected to feel victorious, or at least vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Exclusion hurts, even when you expect it. Exclusion from people you tried desperately to love hurts even more. I didn't cry at first. My body felt too numb for that. But the longer I laid there, the more the numbness cracked, and then the tears came. Not gentle tears, not delicate crying. The kind of crying that rips something out of you. The kind where your chest caves in and you realize how long you've been holding your breath, waiting for people to love you the way you love them. I cried for the girl I used to be, the one who thought effort equaled belonging. The one who thought family meant loyalty. The one who tried her best and was never enough. I cried until the exhaustion pulled me under. The next few days blurred together. Emails went unanswered. Freelance deadlines slipped. My fridge contained nothing but almond milk and a withered lime. Even Evan seemed unsure how close to stand. He called, checked in, sent supportive messages, but didn't push. He knew me well enough to understand that pain this old didn't need forcing. It needed space. He told me he'd bring soup. I told him I didn't want company. He respected it, but not without saying, "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." And somehow that made me cry even harder after I hung up. On the 5th day, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a card. No decoration. Just plain cardstock with a single typed line. "You really showed your true colors." No signature, but I could guess. I stared at it for nearly a full minute before laughing. A real unrestrained laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. I had spent years showing my true colors. Years showing up. Years giving helping rescuing. And the moment I simply didn't show up, that was the betrayal. No, that was the revelation. I tore the card in half, then again, until it was confetti in my trash bin. And the next morning, I turned my laptop on for the first time since the cruise. At the top of my inbox was an email from an indie art magazine I'd pitched months ago. They wanted to feature my latest photo series in a digital spread. The editor called it raw, stunning, and emotionally resonant. I reread the email twice, then a third time. My first instinct to question whether I deserved it, to wonder if it was a fluke. But something inside me whispered, no, accept good things the way you accept blame, quietly and without argument. So I typed 2 simple words, "Thank you." It felt like the smallest step in the world, and yet it felt like stepping out of a cage I didn't realize I'd been living in. Over the next few weeks, I forced myself to rebuild. Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just gently. I took on small design projects. I walked around my neighborhood every evening. I cooked simple meals. I watched quiet movies. I let myself rest in ways I never allowed when I was busy overcompensating for a family who didn't care. And slowly, carefully, life began to stitch itself back together. But the silence from my family echoed through everything. Until one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. "Shirley, sweetheart, I just wanted to check in. I'm not here to defend anyone, but I miss you. I hope we can talk." Her voice cracked at the end. For the first time since the wedding week, I didn't feel anger tightening in my chest. I felt something else. Possibility. Something was shifting. But I had no idea then that the universe was winding up for something much bigger. something that would hand me the truth on a silver platter and change everything all over again. When people talk about healing, they never mention the boredom, the stillness, the quiet afternoons where nothing happens except the realization that you've spent years moving at a pace set by everyone but yourself. The weeks after the wedding fallout were like that, slow, muted, almost peaceful, in a way that felt suspicious. I wasn't depressed anymore, not exactly, just suspended, as if my life had stopped mid-sentence and I was waiting for the next word to appear. I answered a few freelance emails, took long showers, started sleeping through the night again. But something in me still hummed with unfinished business, as if the story with my family hadn't truly ended, it had only paused. And then the universe dropped something into my lap so precisely, so absurdly perfect, it felt scripted. It started with a message from Avery. Avery and I met in our college graphic design program, two insomniac girls bonding over brutalist typography, caffeinated misery, and professors who worshipped grid systems more than human emotion. After graduation, she pivoted to event planning and branding, the high-gloss, high-pressure world that influencers loved and normal people feared. We hadn't talked in over a year when her name lit up my screen. Avery. Hey, you still doing branding freelance? I might have a client for you. Total emergency job. I frowned. I typed back. Me depends on the kind of emergency. Avery replied instantly. Avery wedding planner meltdown. Her web designer bailed before launch. She needs someone fast, pays well, needs someone discreet. Interested. Wedding planner meltdown. Discreet. Paying well. I exhaled slowly, already sensing the shape of what was coming. The universe had been quiet for weeks, but now it felt like it was setting the stage. Me. What's the name of the planner? 5 seconds, then the message arrived. Avery Lux Vows by Vanessa. I froze. Vanessa Crane. The same wedding planner my cousin Marissa had bragged about hiring. The same woman whose curated feeds, pastel mood boards, and self-help affirmations I had seen plastered across Marissa's stories. The same woman who had, if the rumors were true, distanced herself from the chaos at Marissa's wedding. I didn't believe in signs before that moment, but standing there in my kitchen holding my phone like it might combust, I became a believer. I messaged back, me, I'm in. Vanessa scheduled a Zoom call that evening. I half expected her to back out. Instead, I was greeted by a woman in oversized sunglasses indoors, sipping a green juice so aggressively it felt like intimidation. Shirley. Thank you for joining on such short notice, she chirped, smiling too broadly like someone trying to hide a sinking ship behind her teeth. Her voice was honey-coated chaos. She walked me through her rebrand, a new website, new colors, new messaging, new ethos. Basically, a reputation facelift disguised as strategy. She didn't recognize me, not even a flicker of recognition. To her, I was just another freelancer Avery had recommended, reliable, competent, faceless. Perfect. By the end of the call, she had sent me access to her entire drive. Full client list notes, contracts, past work testimonials, some clearly written by her, and most importantly, documentation. Real raw documentation. It took exactly 10 minutes of browsing before I found it. A folder labeled Marissa plus Caleb Platinum Package. My pulse jumped. I opened it. Inside invoices, call logs, email threads, vendor contracts, payment receipts, and then gold. A note buried in the caterer's correspondence. Final payment overdue. Contacted client 3 times. No response. Cancellation triggered per contract. 3 attempts. No response. Not Vanessa's fault. Not a double booking. Marissa simply didn't pay. My jaw clenched as I clicked deeper into the folder. Then I saw the guest list spreadsheet. At first, I skimmed through names, barely noticing the labels next to them. Green VIP yellow. Extended Ray. Difficult. Then I reached my name. Calendar, Shirley Red. Note do not invite. Unreliable. May cause drama. I stared at that line for a full minute. My ears rang, not from pain, from clarity sharper than anything I'd ever felt. Me, unreliable. Me, drama. Me, the cousin who had driven people to airports, paid medical bills, run errands, taken photos for free, designed graphics without credit. They had labeled me a problem before I ever knew there was a problem. Marissa didn't just forget me. She erased me. And worse, she lied about me. Something inside me went quiet then. Not broken. Focused. Because the truth wasn't just in my hands, it was organized in folders. I could have taken the files and marched into a family group chat confronting everyone in one glorious detonation. But revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's precise, controlled, surgical. So I called someone else, someone who understood narrative. Maya. We'd known each other through mutual creative circles. She'd recently launched a YouTube channel and podcast dissecting toxic family systems, generational manipulation, and emotional cycles people usually needed therapy to even acknowledge. She needed stories. I had one, with evidence. We met at a small cafe with mismatched chairs and artisanal tea, so expensive it should have come with a diploma. I slid my laptop across the table. You might want to see this. Maya opened the folder, scrolled, stopped. Her eyes widened. Holy, Shirley. Yeah, you have everything. I know. She looked up at me, then really looked. Are you ready to tell this story? I didn't answer immediately, not because I doubted the choice, but because I needed to feel the gravity of it. For years, my family had dictated the narrative of who I was. Too sensitive, too odd, too dramatic, too much. But seeing that spreadsheet lit a fire inside me I didn't know existed. A fire built from years of buried pain, repressed fury, and quiet endurance. I'm ready, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. We spent the next 2 weeks crafting the first video and anonymized case study about the invisible daughter in toxic family hierarchies. My voice was altered, names changed, documents blurred, but the emotional truth, undeniable. It wasn't just a takedown, it was an education. Maya edited it like a documentary. Soft music, slow zooms, highlighted quotes from therapists, emotional pacing that hit like a confession whispered in the dark. We posted it quietly on a Monday. By Wednesday, it had 120,000 views. By Friday, the comments numbered in the thousands. This is my family. I felt every word. I'm crying. I thought I imagined my childhood. Whoever this is, your strength is unbelievable. And then just when the momentum steadied, my phone buzzed. Caleb, Marissa's husband, the man she swore knew everything. His message was short. Caleb, I didn't know about any of this. We need to talk. I stared at his text, the words glowing back at me in the dim light of my apartment. Talk. No. Talking was what got me ignored for years. But listening. Listening was something I was finally willing to let others do. For once, I wasn't the quiet one. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the forgotten cousin. I was the narrator now, and my story wasn't done. Caleb's message sat on my screen for almost 2 full days, blue-lit, unread, quietly waiting like a ghost, tapping at the door. I didn't know about any of this. We need to talk. The old me, the version trained to fix everything smooth, everything soothe, everyone would have responded right away. She would have apologized even if she didn't know what for. She would have explained herself until she was empty. But that Shirley was gone, so I let the message sit, let Caleb sit in that silence I'd spent years drowning in. I didn't owe him immediacy. I didn't owe him clarity. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Not explanation, not comfort, not repair. Instead, I kept working with Maya. Because the first episode of our series, that was only the beginning. The comments kept flooding in hundreds, then thousands. People sharing stories of being erased, dismissed, scapegoated. Women saying they felt seen for the first time in years. Men confessing the guilt of realizing they had done to their sisters what my family had done to me. It was bigger than me, bigger than Marissa, bigger than one ruined wedding, and Maya. God bless her, understood narrative arcs better than most therapists understand trauma. We need to build, she said, during one of our late-night editing sessions. Each episode goes deeper. The final one, she leaned back, eyes glinting. The final one is where everything changes. I already knew what the final episode would be. The wedding, the $7,000 demand, the voicemail, the guest list spreadsheet with the red-coded label next to my name. Do not invite unreliable. May cause drama. Oh, I'd cause some drama, all right, but not the kind they expected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of quiet, disciplined creation. We released episode 2, Patterns of the Helper Child. Then episode 3, Selective Love, Why Some Daughters Never Feel Chosen. Then episode 4, How Families Rewrite Reality to Protect the Golden Child. Each one pulled deeper threads, not gossip but psychology, not accusation but analysis, not outrage but reflection. Every episode blurred, identifying details, changed names, anonymized dates. But the emotional truth was intact. My story became a case study for broader systemic patterns. The view counts climbed, tens of thousands, then hundreds. People found their own families in mine. Then, when the moment felt right, when the audience was fully invested, fully listening, we released the finale. Episode 8, You Owe This Family. It dropped on a Friday morning with no fanfare, no trailer, no announcement. Just an hour-long audio documentary with my modulated voice, soft atmospheric music, and the kind of pacing that sinks into your bones. We structured it like a slow reveal. First, the years of being sidelined, then the Christmas exclusion, then the engagement dinner trap, then the truth behind the bridal shower, then the missing invitation, and finally the wedding weekend. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't embellish it. I told it plainly. The frantic texts, the $7,000 demand, the accusation that I owed them, the voicemail. We added the sound of waves, the same ones I'd listened to on the cruise deck, underneath my recounting of the messages. It created a haunting calm that made the betrayal feel even sharper. When the episode ended, Maya added a simple closing line. Sometimes the most radical act of love you can perform is loving yourself enough to walk away. Then silence. A silence that spread further than I ever imagined. It went viral. Not popular, viral. Within 12 hours, it hit number 3 on the Apple Podcast drama chart. By evening, it was number 1. Reddit threads exploded with speculation. TikTok creators reenacted the voicemail with dramatic readings. BuzzFeed published an article, Podcast Exposes Family Manipulation, the Internet is Obsessed. And the fallout. It hit exactly where it needed to. First, Vanessa. Her Instagram was flooded with comments. Were you the planner? Why did you let a bride stiff her vendors? Fake testimonials. She posted a shaky statement about reevaluating business practices, then disabled comments, then made her account private, then quietly her website went dark. Luxe Vows by Vanessa Gone. Next, Marissa. At first, she pretended not to notice. She posted skincare videos, outfit of the day clips, a crying selfie about being misunderstood. But the internet is a detective with too much free time. Someone found her old tweet from the morning after her wedding. Family can be the worst. Don't rely on anyone but yourself. Someone else paired it with a clip from the podcast. Someone else found photos from the wedding where I was notably absent. Someone else posted screenshots of her bragging about exclusive guest lists. The dots connected faster than she could delete them. She posted a Notes app apology. I did invite Shirley. She chose to stir drama. The podcast exaggerated. Please respect my privacy. Oh, sweetheart. Bad move. Because Maya uploaded the voicemail. Legally. Anonymized except for the voice. Raw. Unedited. Nothing but Marissa's words. You owe this family. Wire $7,000 now or the wedding's ruined. The internet turned. Her follower count plummeted by tens of thousands. Brands distanced themselves. Even her loyal followers questioned her authenticity. But the biggest shock wasn't online. It was personal. Caleb messaged me again. Caleb, she lied to me. To everyone. I'm done lying for her. Thank you for telling the truth, even if it wasn't to me. This time I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because his realization wasn't my responsibility. A month later, a cousin sent me a link. Caleb had filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. The comments section was a battlefield, but I stayed out of it. I didn't need to add anything. The truth had already done the work. Then came the message I didn't expect. My mother. She asked to meet, not in a tense, guilt-laced way. In a soft, trembling voice I hadn't heard in years. We met at a small, quiet cafe. She looked older, like the weight of pretending everything was normal had finally started to crack her spine. She didn't defend anyone, didn't excuse anything, didn't ask me to make peace. She just said, I listened to the podcast. I knew things weren't fair with you, but I didn't know how far it went. And I'm sorry, you didn't deserve any of it. Then she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check. $3,000. The money you loaned Karen, she whispered. She won't repay you, so I will. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement. About finally seeing me without asking me to shrink. I nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just a beginning. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt my chest loosen. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the scapegoat. And the story, my story, was no longer theirs to tell. The day after I met with my mother, the day she handed me that quiet apology wrapped in a $3,000 check, I woke up feeling different. Lighter, maybe. Not healed, not whole, not triumphant, but unburdened in a way I'd never experienced when it came to my family. I made breakfast without my usual knot in my stomach. I listened to music, real music, not the background noise I used to fill my silence with. I even opened the curtains and let the sunlight spill over everything. It felt like the beginning of something, not a new chapter, a new book entirely. And yet life wasn't suddenly perfect. Healing rarely works that way. It's not all victory montages and confident strutting. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's painfully ordinary. But it was mine. And for the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to make others comfortable. The podcast continued to blow up. Episode 8 stabilized at the top of the charts for weeks. Media outlets wanted follow-ups. Therapy accounts dissected it. Entire online communities built discussions around family roles and generational trauma. But Maya and I, the people at the center of the storm, stayed grounded. We didn't chase notoriety. We didn't fan the flames. We didn't need to. The story had spoken for itself. Still, every time my inbox pinged or my phone buzzed, there was a part of me, small, still healing, that braced for impact. A part expecting anger, retaliation, another round of guilt. And I got some of that, sure. Cousin Amanda messaged me privately. Amanda, it was brave what you did. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. Uncle Mark sent a long, rambling email about rifts and family values and misunderstandings, which was basically his version of an apology. A few others reached out too, quietly, carefully, avoiding the group chat like it was radioactive. But not everyone was silent. Aunt Karen, unsurprisingly, went on a private Facebook tirade, claiming I'd exaggerated, misrepresented, twisted narratives and hurt the family brand. The family brand. That phrase alone nearly made me choke on my tea. She kept talking. I kept ignoring her. Because the freedom I'd tasted on that cruise deck, the freedom of knowing I had finally broken the cycle, was something she couldn't take away from me. Not anymore. Around this time, I heard from someone else. Evan, my boyfriend, though. Boyfriend felt too small a word for someone who had watched me unravel, retreat, and rebuild without pushing, without questioning, without demanding explanations. We'd drifted those first weeks after the wedding chaos, not from lack of care, but because I'd withdrawn into myself. I'd needed solitude the way burned skin needs cool air. But one evening, as I sat sketching ideas for a new art series, my phone buzzed. Evan, can I come by? Only if you want me to. I stared at the message for a long moment. Old Shirley would have hesitated. New Shirley didn't. Me, yes, come over. 25 minutes later, he was at my door, holding a container of soup like a peace offering. This time he said, stepping inside, I'm not assuming you want space unless you tell me. It was small, but it was everything. We talked, really talked. I told him about the files, about Vanessa, about the podcast, about the fallout, about my mother, about the strange, trembling relief of finally choosing myself. He listened without interruption, something I didn't realize I'd been starved for until that moment. When I finished, he didn't tell me I should forgive. He didn't tell me I should reconcile. He didn't tell me I should be the bigger person. He just said, I'm proud of you. Not for the podcast, not for the fallout, for finally treating yourself the way you treat everyone else. Then he pulled me into his arms, not in a dramatic, cinematic swoop, but in a quiet, grounded way that made me realize how long I'd been carrying myself alone. Healing suddenly didn't feel quite as lonely. In the weeks that followed, I slipped into a rhythm that felt almost foreign peace. Not perfect peace, not constant peace, but real peace. I worked on branding projects that made me excited again. I walked to the market every weekend. I drank coffee slowly instead of swallowing it on the go. I painted messy abstracts on large canvases with no intention of selling them. I cooked dinner with Evan on Fridays, sometimes successfully, sometimes laughably not. I let myself enjoy things I used to rush through. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet living, I realized something monumental. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. Not Marissa's, not Aunt Karen's, not the family's collective measuring tape. It was like stepping out of a shadow so large I hadn't known I'd been living in it. The distance didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like freedom. One morning, while editing a new client's logo concepts, I received a text that stopped my breath. It was from Caleb. Caleb, divorce is finalized. I thought you should know. I'm sorry for everything she put you through. She put all of us through. You didn't deserve any of it. I read it once, then again, then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need it. His apology wasn't for me. It was for himself. And I wish him well, truly. But I wasn't a character in their marriage. I was just the scapegoat who stopped accepting her role. Months passed. Seasons changed. The podcast maintained its momentum, becoming a quiet staple in corners of the internet where people were finally learning to name, not hide their wounds. Maya encouraged me to start my own creative series, Visual Stories, about healing boundaries, self-worth. I began planning it, sketching concepts, building outlines. It felt like purpose not born from pain, but from transformation. One evening, after a long day spent editing photos for a nonprofit, I got a message from my mother. Mom, your aunt is still upset. I'm not taking sides. I'm choosing peace. Whenever you're ready, I'd love for you to come over for dinner. I didn't reply right away. I took my time because centering myself wasn't selfish. It was healthy. Later that night, I wrote back, "Me, dinner sounds nice. Just us." Her reply came quickly. "Mom, just us. Always." And that was enough. Maybe the biggest lesson wasn't revenge, or justice, or vindication. Maybe it was this. Sometimes you don't need the family you were born into to become the person you were meant to be. Sometimes the door you close behind you is the very one that lets the sunlight in. As I stood in my living room one evening, golden light pouring through the windows, canvases propped against the walls, tea in hand, Evan. Chopping vegetables in the kitchen, a soft playlist humming in the background, I realized something I had never felt before. I was safe. I was whole. I belonged. Not because of them, but because of me. Peace doesn't arrive the way storms do. It doesn't roar. It doesn't crash. It doesn't demand you notice it. It seeps in quietly, a soft shift in the air, a loosening in the chest, a morning where you realize you didn't wake up braced for disaster. Months after the wedding. Fallout after the podcast, after the apologies and the silences, and the unraveling of relationships I once bent myself to protect life, settled into something I didn't recognize at first. Something gentle, something stable, something I'd never been allowed to feel in that family. Something like peace. I didn't wake up one day suddenly healed. Healing was slower, more delicate, like piecing together a mosaic from shards you didn't know were sharp until you picked them up barefoot. Some days I felt powerful. Other days, I felt like a child trying to remember how to trust her own voice. But most days, I felt present. And presence was a luxury I'd never given myself before. My apartment became a sanctuary. Not in the aspirational, Pinterest-perfect way Marissa would have displayed online, but in the quiet, lived-in way that actually mattered. Paintbrushes in a jar by the window. 3 unfinished canvases leaning against the bookshelf. A stack of books with dog-eared pages because I read them slowly, purposefully. A space filled with my energy, not the ghost of expectations I used to mold myself to. Evan was part of that piece too. Not because he filled a void, but because he didn't demand I shrink to fit him. He showed up without pressure, without possessiveness, without needing to be the center of my healing. He was simply safe, a steady presence instead of a performance. Sometimes we cooked together, bumping hips in the kitchen like awkward dancers. Sometimes we ordered takeout and talked about nothing. Sometimes he read on the couch while I painted, each of us in our own bubble, sharing the air without needing to share every word. It felt like breathing. For the first time, love didn't feel like work. My relationship with my mother, fragile but mending, became its own quiet journey. We started with weekly calls that lasted just long enough to bridge the distance without overwhelming either of us. She didn't pressure me to see the family. She didn't try to defend anyone. She never uttered the words, "You should forgive," because she finally understood that forgiveness isn't a favor, it's a freedom. One Sunday I had dinner with her. Just us, just like I'd requested. No drama, no guilt, no comparisons. No Marissa said this or Karen thinks that. Just a mother and daughter eating roasted chicken and laughing about her failed attempts at gardening. It was simple, and it was enough. She didn't say she was proud of me again. She didn't need to. I felt it in her softness. She was learning. I was learning. We were both growing out of old roles we never chose. The rest of the family. Well, that story took its own path. Aunt Karen doubled down on denial, clinging to her version of events like a life raft. She posted cryptic messages about betrayal, family loyalty, and outsiders causing chaos. Sometimes I wondered if she forgot I could still see her posts. Sometimes I wondered if she posted because she knew I could. Either way, it didn't matter. I no longer lived inside the emotional landscape where her words held power. Marissa went quiet for a while after the divorce filing. Then she reemerged with a new aesthetic minimalist, muted softer. She posted captions about growth, new beginnings, and protecting your peace, though never acknowledging the wreckage behind those words. I didn't follow her, but screenshots found their way to me anyway. People wanted to know if I'd seen, if I cared, if I felt vindicated. The truth, I didn't feel anything at all. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not revenge, just nothing. Because her life, her choices, her consequences no longer intersected with my worth. I wasn't the foil to her story anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the invisible cousin. I was simply not part of her world. And that absence felt like a door closing behind me with a click, quiet, final freeing. Therapists and writers often talk about closure like it's something you confront, a conversation, a confession, a moment where someone finally admits the truth. But closure wasn't something Marissa could give me. It wasn't something Aunt Karen could return in a remorseful text. Closure happened the day I realized I didn't need their apology to feel whole. It happened the day I understood that walking away wasn't anger, it was self-respect. It happened the moment I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. That was the real ending. The podcast continued quietly evolving into stories from others, anonymous submissions about family wounds and quiet resilience. Maya and I became a small voice in a big conversation about emotional boundaries, scapegoating, and healing. My art grew alongside it. I painted more, photographed more, designed branding for women, starting businesses rooted in self-worth and authenticity, collaborated with nonprofits, created things that felt meaningful, not performative. Every project pulled me further from the shadow I used to live in. Every canvas layered with colors I used to be afraid to show. Every step I took, gentle, intentional, felt like a reclaiming of the girl who once let a family define her. One evening, as Evan chopped vegetables in the kitchen and I lit a candle on the coffee table, he asked, "Do you ever miss them?" I paused. The question wasn't loaded, it wasn't judgment, it wasn't a trap. He genuinely wanted to know. I thought about it. Did I miss the chaos, the hierarchy, the guilt, the constant effort to be enough for people who didn't know how to love me? No. But did I miss the idea of family? The version I always hoped they would be, the version I built in my mind to survive them. Yes. Sometimes I missed the dream, but the dream had never been real. So I told him honestly, I miss who I tried to be with them, but I don't miss who they were with me. He nodded, leaning over to kiss my forehead, a soft gesture that held more truth than any apology my family ever offered. Later that night, I stood by my apartment window, watching the streetlights flicker against the sidewalk. It was quiet, ordinary. But something tugged at me, a gentle, tender truth I'd been circling for months without naming. All my life I had been taught to make myself small, quiet, useful, acceptable. All my life I'd carried wounds dressed as responsibilities, carried guilt disguised as love, carried expectations that were never mine to bear. But now in this apartment filled with unfinished paintings and quiet music, I felt a new truth settle into my bones. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't too much. I was finally enough for myself. Peace didn't come from their approval. It came from leaving the places where I was never meant to stay. And as the candle flickered, the room glowing in soft amber light, I whispered to myself the words I once needed so desperately from others. You made it out. You made something beautiful out of the broken pieces. You can breathe now. And I did. Deeply, fully, freely.